when I say dumb, I mean it literally. It is a dumpster fire of a column from Jon Talton over at the Seattle Times. And here's how bad it is. I saw this on Friday, and I was about to start one of the hours of the show on this. But then I said to myself, okay, you kind of sped through the column. Let's actually spend some time thinking about it. And to my surprise, I only had to add an additional 7 seconds over the weekend thinking about this dumpster fire of a column. Now, we've invited Jon Talton on the show.
Yeah, he passed.
Okay. So I don't have to feel bad about my column coming out later tonight calling him the dumbest of the dumb. No, I wouldn't have felt bad anyway. We don't normally do this, but we're actually going to read this column. And we start with the melodramatic headline. A Trump victory would at least shatter the Seattle economy. Okay, let's do that again. A Trump victory would at least shatter the Seattle economy.
What could be worse than that?
Completely decimate, I suppose. Shatter is destroy, isn't it? What could be worse?
Yeah.
We will cease to have an economy. Kind of like democracy. If Donald Trump wins, we'll cease to have an economy. And so, at first glance, when I saw the headline, I almost was wondering if it was a parody. Because this is the guy who writes about business and the economy. You would expect that he would have an understanding about business and the economy. The economic conditions in Seattle were better under Trump than they were under Joe Biden. Now, I'm taking out 1 year for each of them, the COVID 2 years, because I don't think that that's fair, even though I think certainly in the Biden COVID era, they did a lot of things they knew to be wrong. But out of basic fairness, I'm going to look at the first 3 years of Trump and the last 3 years of Biden, and it's a no-brainer. But this is what he writes. And remember, this is a topic about the economy of what city?
Seattle.
Okay. This is the first paragraph. Former President Donald Trump doesn't care for the Seattle region or its economy. Oh, so now we're at region. First sentence, we're already at region. Recall that as president, he forced Boeing, formerly headquartered here, into a fixed price contract to convert two 747s into the new Air Force One airplanes. So that's the example he's going to start with. And I remember when this all happened. This was obviously a big story here because of the Boeing connection. Those likely would have been assembled and modified in Everett. It takes two to blunder. Although the contract forced Boeing to take a $660 million write-down for the flying White Houses in 2022, the company lauded the deal in 2018. Okay, so you're already saying that your first example about how Donald Trump would destroy our economy, and weirdly you start with a Boeing example that the company lauded when it occurred. Like they celebrated the fact that it happened. That's not a good example. That's not a good example. And yet, he calls them bullies, or Donald Trump administration bullies. In addition to bullying Boeing, Trump also threatened Amazon. Now, he doesn't explain the threat. He just has a link to the so-called threat, and I clicked it because, God, I hate myself. And you know what the threat was? When Donald Trump posted at the time on Twitter that it was unfair that Amazon was getting specialty rates from the United States Postal Service and that they should pay what everybody else pays, which you would think is actually a position of folks on the left who don't want big corporations to get a tax benefit. Now, I happen to disagree with Donald Trump on that, but he wasn't threatening them. He said they should pay the same as everybody else. That's not a threat. It's like a policy position. But that's a threat. In September 2020, as the pandemic intensified, the Trump administration labeled Seattle an anarchist jurisdiction and threatened to end federal funding. It was an anarchist jurisdiction. You were here, right, in 2020 of September, John? Were you around? You know what just had, I mean, really? Are we, okay. The administration similarly labeled Portland and New York City Trump's hometown because of protests and some civil unrest after the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. Some civil unrest? We had riots in downtown Seattle and a literal autonomous zone in which cops were ordered to leave, couldn't get back in, and people were murdered, and there was an attempted rape and an attempted arson. That's a little bit more than some.
But they were mostly peaceful.
Oh, dear God. So far, he hasn't even made his case yet about the economy. He's not even talking about the economy. This is arguably my favorite part. Whatever Seattle's shortcomings in 2020, it was a superstar city. We were a superstar city in 2020? I'm sorry, did Jon Talton live in Seattle in 2020? Did he visit Seattle in 2020? Or was he stuck at home, away from the world because he didn't want to catch COVID?
Probably the latter.
The metropolitan area, now he moves away from Seattle again. The metropolitan area has been home to 2 of the 5 big tech giants, Amazon here and Microsoft in Redmond. Okay, so he's already going to Redmond now. Plus numerous other corporate headquarters. A natural deep water port essential to world trade in the Northwest Seaport Alliance, along with the Port of Tacoma, and one of the most vibrant and diverse economies in the United States. We have a diverse economy in Seattle? Because it kind of feels like we're tech-heavy in Seattle. Okay. Make a mental note of that. Seattle still enjoys these advantages, along with one of the highest rates of adults with bachelor's degrees or higher in the country, a dynamic startup scene, and high-end outposts of Silicon Valley companies here and on the east side. Nothing ever came of the bluffs, but as Trump seeks to regain the White House, it's time to review the stakes for the economy in November's election for the Puget Sound region, nation, and world. So we're about halfway in, and he just now gets to the subject. So we're halfway in. The Truth challenged former president is still lying about Seattle. During the September debate with Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump falsely claimed that when protesters of the Floyd murder went into Seattle, they took advantage of a quote-unquote big percentage of the city of Seattle. How is that his first example to make his case that Trump in office would destroy our economy? He said something that was factually inaccurate about Seattle, but his point was 100% valid. It is correct that as a matter of percentage, he was wrong when he said a big percentage of Seattle became CHOP or Chaz. That was incorrect. You do understand that we became CHOP or Chaz in the most densely populated neighborhood of Seattle. People were murdered, nearly raped. Does that not matter? Is that not a big deal to you? Was that mostly peaceful?
He's doing the Martha Raddatz thing.
He really is. This is odd behavior for a man from Queens who made his fortune as an urban developer. Huh? His antipathy for cities is at odds with their outsized role in the national economy. Antipathy towards cities, because he mentioned Seattle once in a way that should have resulted in massive criticism. He talks about New York as if he's having a love affair with it, like most New Yorkers do. This idea, he's got antipathy. No, he doesn't. It's just absurd. According to a September Pew Research Center poll, 81% of registered voters said the economy was the most important issue in the presidential election. Trump supporters were somewhat ahead of Harris backers in listing economic concerns as the top issue. And no wonder. Harris must defend the economic program of President Joe Biden as well as laying out a plan of her own. So, again, has he made a single argument as to why Trump in office would shatter at worst, or at best, I guess, the economy of Seattle?
So far, it just sounds like Trump's a big meanie.
Yeah, Trump bad. He's going to destroy the economy because Trump. This is another self-own. Presidents have only limited control over the economy. He actually writes in an argument about how Donald Trump would destroy our economy. Many factors and dozens of institutions, including the Federal Reserve, apply to its conditions. Still, after a serious inflation scare, he's calling it a scare. After a serious inflation scare, the economy under Biden is remarkably successful despite Trump's claims. Inflation has cooled to a normal level. No, it's still over where it was a year ago. Inflation just went up. It just slightly went up. But Biden's economy, under Biden, the economy has been remarkably successful, he says. And at best, you can say the economy has been good over the course of the last, 6 months? At best. But he says it's been remarkably successful. Like he forgot the previous 3 years. He's just focused now on 2024. He said the unemployment rate for Washington was 4.8% in August and 4.7% for the Seattle-Tacoma Bellevue metropolitan area. Economists consider this full employment. Yeah, okay. So, you do understand that until COVID, the Seattle metro unemployment number saw record lows under Donald Trump, hitting 2.7%. That's almost full employment. Okay, 2.7%. Now, when you take out the first COVID year for Joe Biden, after the city started to recover, which was not a result of policy, but simply a result of reopening the economy, every single month pretty much has been trending in the wrong direction. We're at 4.8% unemployment right now. 4.8%. You do understand that that's high, right? For this region, especially when you compare the last 3 years, which has been steadily inclining versus the steady decline of unemployment under Trump. Now, when you look at the state, it's the same. When Donald Trump was in office, we saw a low of 3.6% unemployment. That's good. Now, we did briefly hit 3.4% under Biden-Harris. That part's true. But then what ended up happening? It reversed. It started to go up and up and up and up to the point where at 4.8% now is higher than the national average. And yet we're bragging about this? This is his argument as to why Trump would destroy our economy because his economic record was better than Joe Biden's? Are we supposed to believe that? Seriously, this is absurd. And it goes on and on and on. And it just eventually becomes the Trump tariffs, which he says are evil and wrong. But the fact that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have kept almost all of the tariffs, that doesn't really get a whole bunch of ink. Although he does briefly mention tariffs against China, which he says are, quote, seeking to reshore strategic industries such as semiconductors. So it's a positive. I'm going to give one more sentence and tell me if you can catch what he's doing here. According to the U.S. Commerce Department, the state's merchandise trade exports declined from $76 billion in 2017 to $41 billion in 2020, Trump's last full year in office. What could explain the decline? What happened in 2020?
COVID.
Yeah. Is that possibly why the exports went down?
Yeah.
Okay. You think he even mentions the word COVID in this at all, this entire article? No, not even a little bit. This is the worst argued piece, not just from Jon Talton, but from anyone ever. Duncan, our 11-year-old intern, legitimately wrote a better argument supporting Biden. I gave him the impossible. I said, even you can support Biden better than Jon Talton. And he did. And it was done in crayon. Big crayon on construction paper. Look, I get that Jon Talton doesn't like Donald Trump, or at least he feels the need to pretend he doesn't like it so he can keep a job as a white guy over at the Seattle Times. Okay, fine. I get it. But why let that hatred, whether or not it's legitimate, drive himself to just embarrassment like this? This is the worst article I've ever seen. Jackson, do you know how hard it is for me to find something dumber than this? And how many dumb things have I seen over the course of just this afternoon? It is a high
You've
bar.
read my articles, so.
Yes. Oh my God. You did infinitely better than he did. Although there were quite a few grammatical mistakes that I had to fix. But other than that, you did better. Oof. This truly is awful.